Yo, what's up guys? So today we are gonna see, what if Naruto switches his opponents with Shikamaru during the preliminary round before the third stage, part 2. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Chilord, link is in the description, and also subscribe to my channel, and like this video. Let's begin the video. You can stop pretending, brat. Anko chuckled slightly, as she looked down at the blonde lump on the bed. She's out of the room. How could you tell? Naruto cracked open his eyes, as he reluctantly sat up, blinking slightly in Anko's direction. Your breathing was too deep for you to be asleep. Anko chuckled softly, as she glanced over the boy, smiling far too cheerfully for his comfort. Hurry up, and get dressed. You've got a lovely day in hell waiting for you. Bring it. Naruto shot back, suddenly standing up, as he clenched his fingers then shot a single digit out at the woman. I'm not afraid, and I'm not backing down. Brave words, kiddo, brave words. She responded with an entirely too sweet smile on her lips. But don't worry, we'll be sure to test just how much you mean them. Now, get dressed, unless you want your girl to walk in on you while you're stripped down. Naruto blinked a moment, then arched a brow, as he gave the woman a look. What? Anko blinked slightly, as the kid just sat there, glaring at her. If I'm not gonna give Kinchan a free show, why the hell would I give you one? Naruto glared at the woman even more, as he crossed his arms firmly about his chest, and huffed slightly. Pervert. Anko stared at the boy for a moment, her eyes blinking rapidly, as she opened and shut her mouth in a steady rhythm before she finally collected herself, and glared down at the boy. I sure as hell don't want to see your scrawny but naked, you crazy brat. Then get out so I can change. Naruto shot back, and growled just a bit, as he huffed back at the woman, who growled back for a moment, before turning her back on him with a snarl. Just hurry up, you damned brat. She shot back, as she immediately stalked away, grumbling slightly under her breath, as she left the boy to get dressed. Not as much fun when the shoe's on the other foot, is it, Anko-chan? Yugo's voice spoke up sweetly, as the purple-haired ANBU slid into place, leaning back against the wall. Yeah? Anko grumbled slightly before shaking her head, and shifting where she stood. So, how badly do you think the girl's going to freak out? We'll see. Yugo responded simply, as she shrugged, and offered a simple canting of her head to the woman. It's crowded here today. A new voice spoke up, as Kakashi appeared in the window, his single eye flicking between Anko and Yugo. I guess you were serious about working with him. Quit hogging the window, brat. Another voice grumbled behind Kakashi just before he was knocked inside by a swift, sandaled boot to his ass, as Jiraiya appeared in his place, smirking slightly. 13 years later, and you're still a pain in the ass. Jiraiya-sama? Kakashi blinked in confusion, as he slowly pushed himself back up to his feet, and dusted himself off, acting as if he hadn't just been booted through the window by a kick. What brings you? Doing your job, it seems. Jiraiya grunted in return before shaking his head slightly, and looking at Anko. You talked to Sensei's brat? Asim will meet us there with his team, Anko affirmed with a slight smirk on her lips. Seems since Karina is busy, he's got plenty of free time on his hands. You only have to buy lunch for his team. Me? Why the hell do I have to buy it? Jiraiya glared back at the woman, pouting slightly. Because you're the one that's loaded, you damn pervert. Anko shot back with an amused smirk on her lips. So, I suppose I should go and tell Ebisu that his services are no longer required? Kakashi offered up, as he started to inch back towards the window, only to freeze, as a pair of kunai embedded themselves in front of his feet. Now, Kakashi-kun, that's not very nice. Jiraiya was practically pouting, as he casually moved himself in between Kakashi and the window. It's been years since I saw the last remaining pupil of my beloved pupil, and you're just going to run off. I was, just here to introduce Naruto to Ebisu before I headed off with Sasuke. Kakashi responded quickly. Since he seems to be taken care of, don't even want to be introduced to the brat's spoil. Anko offered casually, as she slipped up, and smiled sweetly at Kakashi. Really, Cyclops, I thought you of all people would have a bigger interest in the kid. Ah? Kakashi blinked slightly before glancing towards Jiraiya, who nodded his head ever so slightly in response, causing the man to pale further. Now Anko, I'm disappointed in you, Kakashi-senpai. Yugo spoke up before the man could finish whatever he was going to say, and cut off any retort Anko could make. Very disappointed. As Kakashi stiffened up, any response he might have made was interrupted by the arrival of a coolly curious-looking kin with a mask suspiciously like Kakashi's on her face. A loose pair of dark, charcoal-gray pants hung from her waist, down to her calves where white bandages wrapped down to her sandaled feet. Long sleeves of mesh ran from her wrists to her neck, and down to her waist, backless along with the cool gray, open-backed vest that left the spiral mark of her seal plainly visible. With a light, cool gray jacket slung over her shoulder, the girl blinked slightly, as she glanced curiously at Kakashi, before glaring over at Anko. Ha ha, can I take this damn thing off already? It looks dumb enough on that idiot. I can only imagine how bad it makes me look. Kakashi blinked slightly, before carefully lifting his finger, and pointing in Kin's direction. SHE's Naruto's spoil? What was your first clue? Kin countered, her voice dripping with sarcasm, as she glanced towards Anko. Other than the mask, at least you have decent taste in clothing. Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose, and sighed slightly, as he leveled a look at the smug-looking Anko. Oh, how I loathe you, Anko. Kin, meet Naruto's teacher, the infamously tardy, Kakashi Heikate. Anko offered up with a smug look on her lips. Lazy pervert, meet your student's pet bitch. The girl in question blinked slightly, as she glanced up and down at the slightly slumped ninja regarding her much the same, before she turned her attention to Jiraiya. Is this some kind of joke? Afraid not. Jiraiya responded with an amused tug on his lips. So, Naruto-sama's had the copycat as his teacher, and all he's been taught is tree climbing? Kin twitched a moment, then twitched again, staring incredulously at the masked ninja. What the hell is wrong with this village and team building? Kakashi put forth, mildly studying the girl with a slightly twitching look of annoyance. There isn't a war on, there's. Kid, you're only going to dig yourself deeper, Jiraiya advised, as he shook his head and chuckled just a bit. Or did you really think it's just a fine and dandy coincidence that my old teammate showed up in the forest? Kakashi sighed slightly before flicking his gaze towards Jiraiya. They shouldn't have to stop being children. I don't know about Naruto-sama. Kin cut in, glaring mildly at the silver-haired man. But I am. She paused, grimacing slightly, as she amended herself. Was a ninja. That means in order to stay alive, you need to have every edge you can. Not to be coddled. Especially not if you're going to throw them into a Chunin exam, as rookies. I'm still going to the finals, Kin-chan. Naruto's voice cut through everything, as he glanced slowly around the room. Huh, I didn't know I was gonna be so popular today. With that said, the oddly subdued Naruto simply pushed himself past the group, and moved into the kitchen, grumbling slightly, as he pulled out a pot, and then a bag of rice. What are you doing, brat? Anko blinked slightly, as she watched the boy go to work heating water on the stove. Breakfast, was the simple, almost grunted response, as he made a slight sign, and suddenly there were several matching Narutos going to work throughout the kitchen. You know, that thing where you eat to start off the day, so you have the energy to get plenty of training in? The adults and Kin all blinked slightly in shock, as they stared at the blonde boy, who simply glared back at them. What? I'm an orphan. Is it so shocking that I learned how to cook? I'm more surprised you didn't just boil some instant ramen. Kakashi noted, as he studied the boy, as if seeing him for the first time. I love ramen, but that's not all I eat, Naruto said simply, as he twitched just a bit. And in case you hadn't noticed, when I don't like waking up hungry. As Kin's own stomach chose that moment to gurgle slightly, the girl blushed brightly, and spoke up hesitantly, Naruto-sama? Do you mind if I do? I'm making enough for two, Naruto said simply, as he glanced out at the adults. The freeloaders can fend for themselves. I ate it already, Anko supplied simply. I'm good, Yugago affirmed. I don't suppose I could. Jiraiya started to speak up before Kakashi cut him off. We're good, the silver-haired responded simply. I was gonna ask if I could cook something myself, you know. Kin grumbled slightly, as she lightly glared at the blonde boy. You're not the one that can pop out an army, Naruto responded simply. Faster this way. Can we starve him more often? Anko asked curiously, as she studied the boy. I think I like him better this way. No, we'll allow. As Kakashi glared slightly at Yugago, Naruto snorted slightly, and rubbed his eyes with a yawn. Food will be ready in 20 minutes. So anything you want to talk about, or you gonna just stand there? Well, to answer your girl's earlier question, Yugago spoke up, smirking just a bit. Yes, the mask is necessary. A haircut too, to be honest. The girl in question shrugged just a bit before she reached back, lightly tugging at her long hair, and grinned just a bit. Just watch out for the spikes. As Kakashi blinked slightly, and stared at the girl, Jiraiya, and the woman smirked softly, as the older man spoke up. I was wondering why it took so long to make it a big target. I'm not like the blonde, pink-haired bimbos, Kin shot back. I'm not going to spend all my time looking pretty and girly. If I do something with my looks, it's so it'll help in combat. Kin-chan, be nice, Naruto chided quietly, as he yawned again. Sakura-chan is my teammate, she's not weak. She's weak, Kin snapped back, before grumbling slightly, as she glared at the boy, as she grudgingly admitted. But she is smart, and has more guts than I thought she did. Tricking Zaku, and taking those kunai proved that. Turning her attention, she glared at a suddenly nervous-looking Kakashi, which reflects more on her teacher than her. I think I'm gonna no-go, what with Sasuke waiting on me. With that, Kakashi was inching away towards the window, as he could feel every set of eyes following him. So, yeah, bye. As Kakashi vanished in a swirl of leaves, Naruto grumbled slightly. Man, I just swept last night. Naruto. Jiraiya spoke up, his voice carefully neutral. You're a bit different this morning. Well, yesterday I wasn't waking up hungry, angry, and the owner of someone. Naruto shot back with a grumble, as he settled into a chair. It just kinda hit me, you know. He gestured a bit towards the curious-looking Kin. I own her. I own a living, breathing person. And? Kin just shrugged a bit, as she arched a brow at the boy, as she settled down into a chair facing him. You say it like it's something completely new for me. Kin-chan. Look, sound isn't like things here. Kin spoke with a sharp edge to her words, as she glared mildly at the boy. You did what Orochimaru wanted, or you died. She paused a moment, before shuddering violently. Usually painfully, as an experiment, after being caged up like a prisoner for a while. There were some that wanted to glorify what we were. But we were nothing but his tools, no different than his property. Hell, he even likes to mark his elites, like he did with your Uchiha friend. The girl shrugged slightly, as she settled back. So, all I'm wondering is if you're going to be worth it or not. My last master, I don't like admitting what I've been, so I'm waiting for you to show me I didn't saddle myself with a weakling. Anko, unconsciously rubbing at her neck at the girl's mention of Orochimaru's marks, chuckled just a bit, as she looked at the slowly hardening features of the boy. Well, brat, sounds like she's not gonna let you slack off. Naruto paused for a moment, lightly cupping his chin with his fingers. This means I get to be in charge of her training too, doesn't it? Kin felt a sudden, dropping sensation in her stomach, as she saw the positively mischievous grin on Naruto's face. Say, crazy examiner lady, I do have a name, you know, brat. The woman responded, even as she smirked. So do I, crazy examiner lady. Naruto countered with an evil grin on his lips. And I seem to have come into possession of a temperamental, cranky mean girl who has fallen from the path of the righteous. We must redeem her. Will you aid me in this most noble undertaking? He stood then, posing slightly with an almost comically wide grin on his face. What are you gonna do, I say no? Anko asked curiously, even as she struggled to keep down her laughter at the look of horror on Kin's face while Jiraiya was grinning broadly at them both. Talk to super bushy brows, and make it a most youthful undertaking. Naruto responded, suddenly doing a frighteningly accurate approximation of the green-clad duo's good guy pose. At the look of growing horror on Kin's face, Anko's face took on a look of grim consideration. I see your dilemma. But perhaps you shouldn't limit her to one undertaking? Perhaps it should be both a noble and youthful undertaking. When Kin whimpered slightly in response, Anko and Naruto looked at one another, before they both suddenly burst out laughing, as they fell backwards. It was only a moment later that Jiraiya and Yugigo followed them, the small apartment filled with the sound of laughter, as the bemused-looking clones shook their heads, as they continued cooking. Finally realizing what they'd done, Kin scowled at both the boy and the woman even, as her lips threatened to twitch into a smile. That wasn't nice. Was funny though. One of the clones commented with an innocent smile. Oh man, there are two of them. Yugigo wheezed slightly before giggling softly, as she sat up shaking her head in amusement. The Hokage's gonna kill me for getting them together. Sarutobi-sensei will get over it. Jiraiya waved his hand, and chuckled just a bit, as he looked at the giggling pair, before a somber look crossed his face. Kinda weird though, that he chose someone that was so much more like me than him, as an apprentice. And moving on past the creepy observations now, Yugigo noted, as she shuddered slightly at the thought. Alright you two, enough messing with the new girl. Jerks. Kin muttered slightly under her breath. Now be nice, Kin-chan. Naruto chided slightly, before he grinned broadly at her. Otherwise, I won't suggest to Asuma-sensei that you be Ino's sparring partner when she complains about not getting any training. Kin blinked a moment, before her eyes widened slightly in realization. The blonde bimbo body thief? No killing, maiming or disfiguring. Anko cut in firmly, as she crossed her arms about her chest. I'd never hear the end of Inoichi's bitching if you did that to his princess. Not even a little? Kin offered, pouting softly, as she looked up pleadingly from Anko to Naruto. Hey, I'm not going to deny that Ino can be a bitch, Naruto spoke up, raising his hands defensively. A spoiled rotten little wannabe princess, Anko added, muttering slightly under her breath. I take it you've met then. Kin added with a dry drawl, as she grinned at the woman. Take your daughter to work, Anko admitted sourly. Sarutobi actually did it? Jiraiya stared in absolute shock, as his eyes bulged slightly in disbelief. It was supposed to be a joke. Probably was, Anko admitted, as she shrugged just a bit before sighing slightly. You just gotta understand, Ino is Inoichi's pride and joy. I pity any kid that has to make it through his parental approval. Well, other than probably Shikamaru or Chuji, Naruto pointed out, as he smirked slightly, and then shrugged, lounging back. They get free passes, but for some reason, I just can't see Ino settling for either of them the way they are. Plus, she's an Uchiha fangirl. Yugugo pointed out innocently, causing Naruto to scowl sharply and glare at the woman. It always comes down to the bastard. Naruto grumbled slightly before sighing, as he shook his head. I ain't gonna let him get ahead of me. Not anymore. Eesh. Jiraiya shuddered slightly, as he lightly palmed his face. I swear, if he was watching this, Sarutobi-sensei would be laughing his ass off. And in the Hokage Tower, glancing down into his crystal ball, the Hokage was doing just that. So, what do I need to do? Naruto was grinning broadly towards an amused-looking collection of people, as he bounced from the balls of his feet to his heels. Damn it, why can't either of you two be this enthusiastic about training? Ino grumbled, as she glared at her two teammates. Then one of us might have actually ended up in the finals. Ma, it's too troublesome. Shikamaru grumbled just a bit, as he shrugged slightly, and lounged backwards on the ground, staring up at the clouds, as Chuji munched at his chips next to him. Relax, Ino, the exams are every 6 months, you have plenty of time to get ready for them. Asuma Sarutobi assured her with a slight smirk, as he took a light drag on his cigarette. Well, if your brat wants to get some training in, I know someone she could spar with. Anko offered up casually, her face schooled to neutrality, as Naruto and Yugugo each worked to keep their composure. She's gonna be helping me with the kid here later, but for now, I need to put him through his paces so she doesn't have much to do other than put up with the old pervert. Jiraiya's back in town? Asuma grinned slightly, as he took another slight drag on his cigarette before shrugging just a bit. It'll be up to Ino. Sure! Ino agreed eagerly with a nod of her head. Anything's gotta be better than trying to get these two to help. TSK, troublesome. Shikamaru sighed slightly, as he closed his eyes. I fail to see the obsession you blondes have with training. That's because you're a lazy bastard, Shikamaru. Naruto shot back with a slight smirk before turning back to the group of adult ninja. So, what do I need to do already? Just make as large of a group of clones as you can that can keep using chakra for a while, Anko said casually before smirking a bit. Half of them will go with chakra control exercises, the other will stay with Asuma for your elemental training. Right. Naruto nodded again, before suddenly, the training ground was filled with a sea of orange while the original Uzumaki stood proud, as he gestured to either side. All right. You've heard the crazy examiner lady. 2 groups. Right, boss. The army of clones chimed, as in moments they were divided into 2 distinct camps, each looking towards their respective instructors eagerly. Wow. Asuma whistled softly in appreciation, as he studied the groups standing in front of him. And here I thought the rumors were exaggerated. You and I both, Anko admitted, as she stared at the veritable army of orange-clad clones, then shook her head. But damn if this isn't going to be fun. Heh. Yugugo chuckled just a bit, as she looked at the group. All right. Chakra control group with me. To the lake. As the group cheered eagerly, the NBU woman led them off to begin their training. All right, since I'm stuck with you guys, Asuma chuckled a bit, and withdrew his trench knives. I'll start out with a little demonstration of what wind chakra can do. Blondies, well, Original Brat, and Princess Brat, Anko shouted with a smirk. You're with me, Princess Brat? Ino glared daggers at the woman, as she growled slightly while Naruto was already following the trench coat-wearing woman, his arms behind his head. I have a name you know. She knows. Naruto responded casually, as he kept strutting onwards, causing Ino to have to suddenly sprint forward to catch up. Why do you think I call her Crazy Examiner Lady instead of her name? Well, at least I get some actual training. Ino responded, suddenly enthusiastically, as she launched forward. The blonde girl completely missed the predatory smirks that Anko and Naruto sent one another. Wait, what the hell? I gotta spar against her? Ino's face was pale, as she recognized Kin, in spite of the new clothes, lack of headband, and now shoulder-length hair. Kin was grinning a happy, predatory smirk, as she pulled the gray jacket off, and stretched out. Oh, I'm gonna enjoy this. Now, remember Kinchan. Naruto chided lightly, as he crossed his arms about his chest. Taijutsu only for now, no weapons, no killing, maiming, crippling or disfiguring. Fine. Kin pouted slightly at the boy before she grinned back at Ino. I'm still gonna enjoy this, Naruto-sama. Even if you take most of the fun out of it. Again, what the hell? Ino practically shouted, as she turned her eyes away from Kin, and onto Jiraiya, Anko, and Naruto. Naruto-sama? She's a sound nin. She tried to kill Sasuke-kun, and forehead. The life of a ninja is unpredictable. Jiraiya responded sagely, as he grinned at the girl. Besides, I'll be here to referee the match, and offer some advice. Who the hell are you anyway? Ino growled slightly, as she glared at the man. And why the hell would I want to fight this bitch? Well, if you don't want any advice from one of the Anko shrugged slightly, as she lazily drew a kunai, and threw it at Naruto, who yelped, and glared at the woman. I'm sure the bitch will be happy to go back to her private studies with him. Wait, you're telling me He's one of them? Ino responded, incredulously, as she pointed her finger at the offended-looking Jiraiya. You know, I really should talk to Inoichi about teaching his daughter some manners. Jiraiya grumbled just a bit. Or you could, stop being such an old, perverted toad. Kin countered with an obviously fake sweetness. You do know if I want to throw you back to Orochimaru, the brat can't stop me, right? They glared at the suddenly pale girl, as he ignored Naruto's glare. Hey! Don't you even think about it, you old perv. Naruto suddenly hit the ground, as he dodged another lazily thrown kunai thrown by Anko. Damn it, do you have to keep doing that? Yup, Anko affirmed with a wicked grin on her lips, as she pulled out another kunai, and threw it in his direction. I just won't get serious about it until you finish your conversation. Gee thanks, Naruto grumbled slightly, as he glared at the woman before sighing, and looking back at Jiraiya, and Kin, before glancing at Ino. Yeah, apparently he's a. Don't worry, the disappointment you're feeling seems to be universal. Damned brat, Jiraiya grumbled sourly, as he glared back at the blonde boy. I trained for the fourth. At least give me some credit. You also annoyed the snake bastard. Naruto agreed, as he dodged another lazily thrown kunai. I find that more believable. So we gonna do this, or is the body-stealing bimbo gonna prove me right, that she's just a whiny little girl, playing at being a kunoichi? Kin snapped out, rolling her eyes slightly, as she placed a hand on her hip. Otherwise, I'm sure I could find something actually worthwhile to do. Naruto, are you going to just let her talk to me like that? Ino turned her attention to the other blonde, and found him smirking back at her. You mean, like you and Sakura-chan used to always talk about me? Naruto shot back, as he shifted again against the kunai. Could I get her to stop? Yup, the grin only grew, as he looked into straight in the eyes. But you know what? You want her to stop? Do what I did. Prove that what people say about you is wrong. He suddenly shifted, and another lazily thrown kunai elicited a wet thunk, as it struck meaty flesh in Naruto's palm, spearing into the skin and muscles, as a pool of blood started to drip out of it, as he stared back at Ino. Because you have a choice, you can keep whining about how you're a real ninja whenever someone says you're not, or you can step up, and prove it, and do what needs to be done. He pulled the kunai out, as he held up his bloody hand forcing her to watch, as it dripped that soft well of thick, crimson blood down onto the grass below them. If you're going to do something, do it. You want to be a ninja? Prove it. Kin-chan will push you harder than probably anyone you've ever fought, because she's going to treat you like what you're supposed to be. Not a princess, but a ninja. So Ino, what's it going to be, princess or ninja? As Ino struggled in open-mouthed shock at his words, Kin was smirking back at her master, her arms crossed about her chest, as Jiraiya and Anko both wore soft smiles of approval on their faces. Shaking her head, Anko sent a mild glare at the boy. You know, brat, you were supposed to dodge the kunai. Blood makes for a better point. The boy shot back, as he reached down into one of his pockets, and pulled out a bandage he quickly wrapped about his hand. Alright, let's do this. Not gonna wait, and see what the princess brat decides to do? Anko asked curiously before she was suddenly dodging out of the way of a bloodied kunai thrown back at her. Nope, Naruto responded, as he dodged a kunai flung back in retaliation. Brat, who told you that you could fight back? There was no anger in her voice, as her grin grew viciously across her lips. Who said I couldn't? Naruto countered, as he threw another kunai back at the woman. Not me, Anko agreed with a smirk, as she started to push him harder and harder, throwing her kunai at increasing speed in his direction. You know, that leaves me curious, Kin noted, as the pair was quickly losing themselves in their little back and forth match. Who's crazier, him, or me for tying himself to him? Brat's too much like his parents to not be crazy, Jiraiya responded absently, his eyes distant, as they followed the eager blonde. Just when I think he favors one of them more, he goes, and starts acting like the other. Heh, you knew Naruto's parents? That got Ino's attention, blinking slightly, as she stared at the man. No one ever really seemed to know anything about him, other than that he was a loud-mouthed brat. He gets it from his mother. Jiraiya's response was almost wistful, as he sighed before shaking his head just a bit, and glancing at the two. So, what's it gonna be, girly? Can no one here use my real name? Ino growled slightly, as she glared back at the man. And no one has explained to me why she's calling Naruto Naruto-sama, ask again after the Chunin exams are over. Kin shot back in an almost bored tone, as she glanced back at a slightly nodding Jiraiya. I'm sure it'll be declassified by then, and, as for the name we can, Jiraiya admitted with a smirk before shrugging slightly. But do you see anyone being addressed by name here? Especially the perverted toad here? Kin added with a smug smirk on her face. So yes, we can, we just choose not to. Fine, let's do this then. Ino shot out, as she slid into a stance, and glowered at the smirking Kin. Oh yeah, this is gonna be fun. Kin was grinning, downright fairly back at the girl, as she slid into her own stance, then struck out on the attack. Ino immediately knew this was gonna be a long, painful day. Naruto groaned softly, as he stumbled into the room, his fingers rubbing at his head gingerly even, as he allowed a smile of satisfaction to curl onto his lips. Seeing the look, Kin arched a brow of her own, a dirt-smudged, and sweat-stained brow, as she leaned back against him. Enjoy yourself then, huh? Heh, like you're one to talk. Naruto shot back, grinning happily back at the girl before he collapsed down onto his couch, pulling her with him. Hey. The girl squirmed a bit even, as she fell back against the boy, sighing slightly, as he grinned, almost drunkenly back at her. You know Ino's going to be back for a rematch tomorrow. Naruto was idly running his fingers through her hair, his eyes dropped, and heavy, as he sighed slightly. Ugh, I feel like I've been working out for days on that training stuff. You're awfully grabby. Kin growled slightly, as she glared mildly down at the boy, even though she made no move to free herself from his grip. It was his right to do what he wanted with her. Sorry. The word was actually solemn, as it left his lips, and his hands left her body, letting her rise up, and stare down at her cautiously. Not thinking straight right now, you know? Just felt nice to hold you before. Humph. Kin growled slightly, as she glared lightly at the boy even, as she pulled away, crossing her arms about her chest. I'm not some little stuffed doll for you to grab onto whenever you want to. Kin-chan, the boy immediately began to protest, as the girl turned her back to him, hands on her knees, as she desperately worked to keep her face in a stony mask. What? There was a growl in her voice, darker than she intended, as she could feel the boy flinching back slightly in response to it. The boy started to say something, struggling to figure out just what he could say to her. She could feel his fingers, hovering just above her skin, almost touching her, as she started to tremble. Tears, glistening in the corners of her eyes, Kin bit back the surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Not like I have a say in the matter. He flinched again, and she could feel the distant warmth of his fingers pulling away, withdrawing, and for some reason, that pissed her off even more. Every guy I knew back in Sound would kill to be in the position you're in, you know that? She paused, taking a slow, steadying breath before she continued. Owning me, or any of the other girls, the first thing they'd do, would be. She almost stuttered, as her jaw clicked shut, her eyes screwing shut, as she hissed slightly under her breath. But you touch me, you grab hold of me, then you flinch back the moment I show a bit of anger. What kind of pathetic guy are you? The Jinchuriki kind. The boy answered softly, as she could feel his tired body slipping away from hers, leaving a void where there had once been warmth. As he quietly shuffled his way back away from the girl, leaving her alone with her thoughts, as he almost seemed to crawl to his bed. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Kin turned her head, and glared at the dejected-looking boy, as he was tiredly stripping himself of his clothes, not seeming to realize fully that she was still there. What kind? What's that supposed to MMPH? Naruto's eyes instantly shot up, flicking over to where Anko had her hand firmly placed atop Kin's mouth. When his recognition did nothing to assuage the boy's tensed wariness, nor the way his hand was subtly reaching towards a kunai, Anko smirked in approval. Relax, brat. I'm just gonna take your girl here to have a little heart-to-heart. Why? His fingers had taken hold of a kunai, the grip tight, as he glared darkly back at the woman. About just what it means to be that kind of guy, Anko responded solemnly, as she felt the girl suddenly tense up in her arms. Don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt her. Just let her go already. Naruto sighed tiredly, and shook his head. I really just want to go to sleep right now. It's not worth it. Yeah, it is. And with that, Anko vanished with Kin in a swirl of leaves, leaving Naruto to groan softly, as he pulled his pants back up, and sighed, as he slipped into his sandals once more, dragging himself back towards the window. Just let her go, kid. Jiraiya's voice spoke up quietly, as he appeared off to the side of the apartment. She needs to listen to what Anko has to say to her. She's my responsibility. Naruto responded stubbornly, even, as he stumbled slightly towards the window, the world blurring for a moment before he grit his teeth, and pushed the exhaustion out of his mind. And you're never going to tell her what it means to be what you are. Jiraiya shot back, freezing the boy in place. Unless she's told, unless she's shown, She's never going to understand what it means to be a sacrifice. She doesn't need to know. Naruto shot back, his voice slurring slightly, as he struggled to push open the window, even as he could feel Jiraiya's strong hand lightly pulling him back despite the struggles he made. Yes, she does, and you know it. Jiraiya shook his head, before giving the kid another tug, backwards, dragging him away from the window despite the boy's struggles to escape. Dun wants her pity. The boy's voice was forced, and slurred past his lips, those dull blue orbs begging for sleep, exhaustion, and emotion weighing them down, as he struggled again against the Sanin's grip. Just leave it. Come on kid, let's get you some rest, you're gonna need it. You've got a long month ahead of you. Shaking his head, Jiraiya firmly began to drag the protesting and fighting kid with him, ignoring the way the boy just continued to struggle against him. Yeesh, you keep this up, and you're going to miss a few days of training. My responsibility. Naruto mumbled quietly, as he struggled still against the man's grip, causing him to sigh softly and shake his head slightly. Yeesh, too damned much like both of them. A faint smile played across Jiraiya's face before he tugged the boy even more firmly back with him, practically tossing the kid onto the bed before moving his hands through a complex series of seals, watching as the boy struggling to try and force himself back up before collapsing, as he succumbed to the induced sleep. Eesh, I'm getting too old for this. Let me go you bitch. Kin snarled angrily, as she tried desperately to strike back at the woman who held her in a firm grip that only seemed to move with her struggles, keeping her tightly bound in place. What the hell? You obviously are in need of a lesson in the facts of life, kitty. Anko suddenly thrust out, throwing the girl back against the edge of the roof with a solid thump. Especially when it comes to the brat. And what, you're gonna beat them into me? Kin shot back, growling angrily, as her eyes flashed at the woman. If need be. Anko agreed, nodding her head with a wide, vicious grin on her lips. But hey, I'm not the stupid bitch that hurt the kid that's putting himself on the line for her. Shaking her head, Anko lazily twirled a kunai around one finger, as she smirked at the girl. You see that brat? The one that you called pathetic? Only person in this fucking village who's had it worse than me. Right, and what the fuck can happen that's so bad in this lovey-dovey village? Kin snapped back growling, as her eyes burned right back at Anko. Hatred. Anko spoke only that single word for a moment, letting it hang in the air, as she shook her head. Me and the brat? We're the scapegoats for two of the worst things to happen to this village. She paused for a moment, barking off a short bitter laugh before she continued. Me? The madness and treason of my dear sensei. He even left me with a wonderful little present. Same one he gave the Uchiha brat, only I never fucking used it. Do you have a cursed seal? Fear flashed through her eyes for a moment, memories of the cruel, smirking lips of a horned, red head, and cold black, and gold eyes glaring down at her flashing through her mind. Heaven. The word was spat past Anko's lips, as she glared at the girl whose eyes widened even further in recognition. When I said the same one he gave the Uchiha, I meant it. Just like I meant that I have never, and will never fucking use it. Growling slightly, Anko stalked up to the girl, her eyes boring down on hers. But do you think that the villagers saw it that way, You think that they cared that I stayed? That I busted my ass to prove I'm still loyal to this village? That I'm not like that snake bastard? I'm gonna guess no. Kin offered up with a slight tone of sarcasm, as she looked back at the woman. Exactly. Anko nodded her head before she caught the kunai's grip in her palm. But you know what, kiddo? I at least had some good times to look back on. Times where I could remember what it was like to not have their eyes so cold and suspicious. And I know what it's like to not be hated. She paused a moment, lightly studying the blade in her hand, as a shaft of moonlight hit its razor edge. The brat though? His whole life, he's been hated. His whole life he's been a pariah. He's had only about one person who cared for him until just the last year or so. For a moment, she paused, shaking her head, as she looked off, her eyes finding the faces carved on the mountain before she continued. Every time he failed, they rejoiced. First time he failed his exams, they were practically celebrating. A lot of them couldn't believe that they'd be willing to let that demon brat become a ninja. And what the hell does all this have to do with why you fucking kidnapped me? Kin snapped back, growling slightly, as she glared at the woman. Are you trying to be thick here, girlie? Anko stared at the girl for a moment before shaking her head, as she lightly pinched the bridge of her nose before stalking up to the girl, smacking her atop her head with the ring of the kunai. He's always been alone. Ow. Kin growled slightly, as she rubbed her head, glaring up at the woman. Yeah, so? You say it like he's the only one. Oh, really now? Anko arched her brow casually. You've been hated, and reviled your whole life without knowing why? Kin blushed slightly at that, even, as she growled back at the woman. Always alone. Huh, maybe you have, kid, maybe you have. Anko responded with a shrug, as she twirled her kunai around her finger. But have you been hated? Kin stared back at the woman for a long moment, before slowly reluctantly shaking her head. No, I haven't. That's the difference there. Anko shrugged a bit, as she chuckled softly. I always kinda admired some of the stories I'd hear about him. Didn't actually know who he was until Anbyu-chan smacked me in the face with it. Shaking her head, she then leaned forward, and tapped the flat end of the kunai's tip against King's nose. But to be is to be a sacrifice, kid. Think about that. I'm trying to get it. Okay. Kin growled softly, and shook her head, as she sighed. But I just don't. Every guy I've ever known he ga. How the hell can he be so fearless one minute then the next? Then you obviously haven't figured out what he's afraid of. Anko shot back, snorting just a bit. Come on, girly. Use that brain of yours. You puzzled out what he was. You should be able to get this. I don't know, okay? Kin snapped back, snarling slightly, and glaring back at the woman. He's not afraid of being hurt. He's not afraid of making his insane, impossible declarations, of people telling him he's wrong, and people refusing to believe him. Hell, he's not even afraid of killing someone, it seems. You're the first person his age that knows what he is. Anko responded with a soft little voice that struck Kin as important for a reason she couldn't quite understand. Remember how we told you that? Think about that, how you treated him before, and how you treated him a moment ago. Arg, why won't you just tell me? Kin glared at the woman in front of her, as she clenched her fists in frustration. Because just telling you doesn't mean you'd get it. Anko rapped the girl again on her head with the ring of the kunai. Of course, we'll have to see if you have enough of a brain in that little head of yours to get it. Damn it! Kin growled angrily back at the woman, glaring at her. More fucking bullshit lessons? Only bullshit if you don't bother to learn them. Anko shot back, and rolled her eyes slightly. What, didn't the bastard teach you to not let your temper cloud your mind? Growling again, Kin glared up at the woman, her fingers twitching slightly, as she wished she had something in hand to throw at the woman. Still, she forced herself to take a slow, deep breath, her chest expanding before she slowly released it. Again, and again, she repeated the gesture, again, and again, forcing her fury to lessen, to drop in her chest, as her clenched fingers slowly relaxed. Focusing on the slowing of sensation, she closed her eyes, centering herself with those breaths. Slow, deep breaths that fell into a steady rhythm, as she forced down the anger, the anxiety, the fear, the worry, letting it all slip away. All those things, becoming like a faint mist that slowly fell by the wayside. Opening her eyes again, Kin studied Anko from beneath the mask pulled up over her nose, and forced herself to think over what she'd said. I heard him, Anko agreed, nodding her head casually, as she again twirled the kunai about her finger. And almost exactly in the way he was afraid of being hurt. Her thoughts raced back over the last day, the actions she'd taken, the emotional roller coasters she'd been on the day before. The way she'd acted, the way she'd reacted, how subdued she'd been, and she quietly leaned back against the wall, as realization began to creep into her mind. Ugh, what the hell? He thinks I'm what, rejecting him? Kin twitched slightly, as she crossed her arms about her chest, and sighed, as she banged her head back against the wall. Idiot. Yeah, well, neither of you were exactly at your best yesterday. Anko smirked a bit, as she chuckled ruefully. Or, at least not at your usual emotional state. Brat scared kid. Ugh, doesn't he get it? After last night it doesn't matter what I say, what I do, hell even what I feel. I'm his for the rest of my life. Kin shook her head, and pinched the bridge of her nose. I couldn't leave him if I wanted to. Do you want to, Anko countered, as she studied the girl carefully, gauging her reactions. For a moment Kin stood there, considering, as she mulled over everything in her mind, and actually thought about it. Did she want to leave him? Slowly she shook her head, as she settled back against the wall. No, I'm just not a nice person. There was no apology in her voice, as she shrugged again, slightly against the wall, as she crossed her arms about her chest, as Anko nodded her head in agreement. Yup, you are a little bitch. Thing is, kid, you're expecting the brat to know what you want, or to just take from you. Anko paused for a moment, her lips drawing into a wicked smirk. Hell, I'm starting to think that's what you want him to do, I Kin paused a moment, before the faintest bit of a blush could be seen blossoming across the visible portions of her cheeks. Maybe. After last night I thought I figured he'd realize that. And when he flinched, you got angry. Anko rolled her eyes slightly, as she slung her arm about the girl's shoulder. Now little bitch, as you've figured out that, tell me, how did you hurt him? He thought I was rejecting him? Kin put for tentatively, almost fearfully, as realization was slowly starting to ripple across her mind, before the anger quickly blossomed once more. That idiot. What the hell? The brat's a bit dense, Anko deadpanned with a slight smirk on her lips. Absolute shit at reading people, because he hasn't been close enough to people to pick up how to. Kin finished for her. Because no one was around him long enough for him to read them. He doesn't get that I was telling him how I wanted him to treat me. Nope, you have to straight out tell him. Anko grinned broadly, as she glanced down at the girl who slumped so fully back against the wall, and probably kept telling him until he got it. Because he's going to stumble, he's going to falter, and he's not going to get that someone would want to be treated that way. Ugh, this is all just such a pain in the fucking ass. Kin growled slightly, and sighed, as she slumped down, and groaned. Hey, I'm not the kinky one that wants to be manhandled, and put in her place. Anko shot back with a smirk before she snickered just a bit. Come on, kid, the old pervert probably forced the brat to sleep to keep him from following us. You think he tried? Kin arched her brow cautiously, as she quietly studied the woman in front of her. I can tell you for a fact he did. Jiraiya's voice spoke up, as the white-haired man appeared on the rooftop. The brat was about to damned well follow you when his whole body was about to drop. He was running on his own. Rather impressive, if stupid. Genjutsu? Anko offered up curiously with a slight smirk on her lips. The man nodded his head with a rueful chuckle, as he lightly stretched out just a bit. Kid fought it off pretty well honestly, considering how tired he was. Turning his head, he glanced down at Kin. Get his little bitch straightened out. I think so. Anko smirked slightly, as she glanced down at the blushing girl. She's come to realize she needs to work on her communication skills. Telling her master she likes being put in her place then? He practically giggled, as he pulled out a book, his eyes alight, as he quickly began to scribble in some notes. Oh yes, this works out marvelously. Pervert. Kin muttered slightly under her breath, and sighed slightly. Didn't we already have a discussion about you and perversion last night? Anko offered up with a chuckle of amusement, as Kin blushed even brighter red in turn. No need to remind me of it. The girl grumbled slightly, and sighed, as she slumped down, and shook her head just a bit before letting off a yawn. Alright, could you take me back now? I want to get some sleep. Depends, where are you going to sleep? Anko asked with a grin spreading broadly across her lips. Where else? Only one bed down there, remember? Kin shot back with a slight smirk on her lips. Good answer. Anko chuckled a bit before grabbing hold of the girl, and vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Warily Naruto forced his eyes to open, as he felt a comfortable warmth pressed back against his chest, and snuggled up against his arms. Blinking rapidly, the blonde boy fought down the urge to yawn, and stared, as he noted Kin pressed back up against him, once more dressed in nothing more than one of his shirts. It was a moment later he realized he himself dressed in his boxers, and little else. Eyes widening, the boy fought down the urge to let out a frightened whimper, as he slowly moved to extricate himself from the girl without waking her up. In the morning, Naruto-sama. Kin's voice noted, as she felt him start to try, and remove his arms from around her body, pressing back against him, before she rolled around, bringing her face to his own. We need to talk. Slowly memories from last night filtered into his mind, and the boy gulped slowly, flinching back in fear, as he couldn't quite meet the girl's eyes. Ah? We do? I'm sorry. She spoke in a soft, gentle voice, as she reached out, and quietly stroked his cheek for a moment. Look, I'm a bitch, a critical, harsh, and pushy bitch. There wasn't any shame in her words, or regret, just a simple statement of fact. I'm probably always going to be that way, which means you're always going to have someone around to kick your ass, and make sure you keep going. Naruto leaned into her touch for that brief contact, almost reveling in the feel, as his eyes slowly lifted up to look into her own, a hesitant smile on his lips. Alright, Kinchan. That said, she paused, her face firm, as she stared into his eyes. You own me, so act like it already. Waha! Naruto blinked in shock, staring back at the girl, confusion clearly written on his face. What do you mean, Kinchan? Taking a slow, deep breath, Kin stared into the boy's eyes. Look, you suck at reading people. Hey, and I gotta accept that, so that means I have to come right out, and tell you things. Kin grumbled slightly, and glared mildly at the boy. It means you want to hug me? Grab me, hell, grope me? Do it. She shook her head. When I don't do what you want, when I'm acting like too much of a bitch, punish me. But I'm not a pervert. I'm not a jerk. Why the hell would I? Naruto's protests were silenced by the sudden, almost fierce nip the girl gave to his lower lip, as she glared again up at him. Oh, what was that for? I'm telling you to do it, because it's what I expect from you. She paused a moment, taking a slow, deep breath before she glared even more at him. It's what I want from you. Slowly she shook her head, almost smirking a bit, as she reached down, and wrapped her arms about his waist, fingers slipping down for a moment, drawing a startled squawk from the shocked boy. I sold myself into slavery a long time ago. I have to accept it. What I expect now is for you to be strong enough to keep me. But waha? Naruto stared at her blankly even, as he blushed brightly at the contact between them. Idiot. Kin muttered slightly, and sighed a bit, a flash of annoyance in her eyes. Okay, remember the night before last? At his vague nod, the girl chuckled a bit, and continued, remember how I answered your question on if I was a pervert? At his blushing nod, the girl smirked to cover up the blush that wanted to rise up across her cheeks. I'm giving you permission to do all the things I told you could, and I'm letting you know I expect you to. But Naruto stared owlishly at the girl, opening and closing his mouth in quick succession, as he stared incredulously into her eyes. Alright, the cluelessness? That's gonna have to go. Kin muttered softly under her breath before sighing slightly, as she stood up, the hem of the t-shirt flashing against her thighs, as she walked towards the bathroom. Hurry up and get dressed, we've got training to do, remember? Right. Naruto blinked slightly, in a daze, as he rolled out of bed, still staring at the retreating space where Kin had occupied only a moment before, as he dressed himself in a daze, blinking again. As he tugged his jacket, and his forehead protector on, he stumbled forward to find his kitchen rather occupied. Yo! Anko waved, as she munched on a piece of onigiri next to the mastidugo while Asuma waved lazily from where he was staring at a shogi board across from Jiraiya, as Ino glared mildly at her teacher. Sleep well? Naruto paused for a moment in consideration, before shrugging a bit, as he casually summoned forth a group of clones who headed towards his kitchen. I'll deal with you later. About time you got up, Ino barked, as she crossed her arms about her chest. We've been waiting for half an hour already. Ino, what did you do after you left the training ground yesterday? Naruto asked with an annoyed twitch on his face, as he glared mildly at the girl. Went home, had some dinner, relaxed some, then went to bed. Why? The blonde girl blinked, uncertain, as she stared back at the boy. When you went home, exhausted, I was still there, training for hours still. I only just woke up. I almost literally came home, and fell asleep. Pausing a moment, Naruto glared mildly at Jiraiya. In fact, if a certain pervert hadn't put a damned on me, you can thank me later, brat. Jiraiya responded with a smirk, as he waved his hand. Your girl was fine, and you needed sleep. In case you hadn't noticed, the brat isn't exactly a morning person. Anko smirked slightly, as she casually picked up a rice ball, and tossed it to the blonde boy who glared at her, but nonetheless accepted. He's a bit grouchy before he's had his morning meal. Typical Naruto. Ino snorted slightly, and shook her head, and grumbled a bit. Always thinking with his stomach. Yes, well, I'm still working on getting him to think with other parts of his anatomy. Kin's voice spoke up, as she appeared, pulling her mask up her face, hiding her smirk beneath it. I've only seen mixed results so far. As Ino blushed brightly amidst the amused chuckles that rose up around her, Naruto stared at the girl blankly for a moment, before scratching the back of his head. What's so damned funny about me using my head? You really are clueless, aren't you, Naruto? Ino shot out blushing still, as she couldn't quite bring herself to look at either the boy or Kin. What are you talking about, Ino? Again the boy blinked slightly, staring at the girl in absolute confusion, as he glanced over at Kin. What is she? I don't know, maybe the bimbo thought I was referring to another part of your body than your head? Kin offered up easily with a vicious smile on her face beneath her mask that only grew, as Ino blushed even brighter. Oh, looks like I'm right. I wonder if she is blushing, as brightly as she is, she must be thinking perverted thoughts. SSH shut up. Ino blushed even brighter, as she glared over at the girl, her eyes narrowing even, as she struggled against the crimson flush. Well, I guess we know which one of your brats is the pervert on your team, huh, Smokey? Anko noted with an amused grin, as she stretched out, still munching on her rice ball. Well, Asuma started, noting the way Ino was staring in complete mortification at Anko, his lips quivering into a slight smirk, as he drew. I can't say it's surprising. Asuma-sensei. Ino squawked in outrage once more, as her gaze rounded about, and stared with wide eyes at the man. Every genin squad has one. Anko spoke with a matter-of-fact tone, as she gestured around them. The had the toad perv. Super pervert. Jiraiya corrected with an amused smirk. Minato's squad did well. Let's just say she was a pervert. Don't forget guys. Asuma spoke up, watching in amusement, as a ripple of fear curled through the air. I've been trying to. Anko shot back, grumbling slightly, as she smirked. Every genin squad has at least one pervert, no matter how they might deny it. So what, Naruto's the one on Team 7 then? Ino shot back, quickly trying to turn the conversation away from her with a blush. I wish. Every eye turned to Kin, Naruto's wife, as he stared at the girl who only blushed slightly under her mask, and shrugged. Would make explaining things to him a lot easier. Okay, Naruto blinked slightly, as he stared at Kin, not quite sure what to say. Don't worry, I'm sure me and the old toad can break through to him. Anko grinned fairly at the boy who twitched slightly in response. So the pervert on his team would be Ino. Paused for a moment, her eyes widening in shock. Sasuke? Naruto stared at the blonde girl a moment, before slowly pausing, as he glanced at the rest of the group. We've established that Ino is the pervert on her team, right? At the amused nods of affirmation, and the indignant huff he continued. So, since we've also established I'm not, who acts more like Ino? Sasuke or? What? Ino blinked slightly, then stared at the boy in shock. You're saying, she's the one who's always trying to get into Sasuke's pants, along with you? Naruto pointed out with a wince, and a shrug, as he settled into his seat, only to blink, as Kin immediately plopped herself down on his lap. Pinky right? Kin nodded her head, and smirked softly. She's at least got some guts, and you said she's on the team with the guy Bimbo here wants in the pants of? You don't have to remind me. Naruto grumbled slightly, as he lightly wrapped an arm about Kin's waist, lightly stroking his fingers against her side anyway. So, you think she's got into Uchiha's pants then? Enko offered up, smirking, as she relished the look of absolute shock that blossomed across Ino's face. Yeah, right. Naruto snorted softly, and shook his head. Like the bastard cares about anything, but getting stronger. Ha! I knew forehead wouldn't get him. Ino crowed triumphantly, as Kin and Naruto both stared at her blankly for a moment. Bimbo! Kin smirked savagely back at the girl. If Pinky, the girl he sees every day, the girl that gets to be closer to him than any other girl, doesn't get anywhere with him, you think a silly little wannabe princess like you has a shot? Why I'm gonna... Ino growled, as her eyes burned, the palatable anger spiking even further when Kin dismissively waved her hand. Right. Save it for training. Kin's smile was lazy, as she relaxed back against her owner. That is why you're here, isn't it? Of course it's why I'm here. Ino growled, as she pointed a finger accusingly towards Asuma. I got more of a workout in that sadistic thing you called sparring than he puts us through in a week. I'd be insulted. But she's the only one on the team that actually has any interest in training. Asuma noted, and shrugged. She's also the only one that can get them to train. Plus, you're lazy too. Jiraiya noted, as he moved a piece on the shogi board. True. Asuma shrugged slightly, and grinned back at the white-haired man. But I already did my time in the 12, so the man shrugged slightly, as he grinned a bit back at Jiraiya. As I recall, the bounty on my head's bigger than the one on yours. Only because I know when to keep my head down, and I've got too many fans that would be outraged. Jiraiya countered slightly even, as Ino, Naruto, and Kin all stared at Asuma. Bounty? Naruto offered it lightly even, as his clones put the dishes of food in front of himself, and Kin. Once you get big enough, kiddo, and if you piss off enough people, you end up with bounties on your head. Asuma responded with a shrug, and a slight grin on his face. The one that would be on my old man's head if he wasn't Hokage. Let's just say it's a good thing that the organizations that make such bounties aren't stupid enough to target the leader of a ninja village. Though, usually they drop the bounties on the really powerful ninja. Kin interjected with a slight smirk. You know, the ones that will wipe out an organization like them for bothering them? Unless they've got a ninja like that on their payroll. Jiraiya countered quietly even, as he shrugged a bit. Then it depends on the ninja. Heard something I should know about. Asuma chuckled a bit, as he made another move on the board even as Naruto, and Kin began to eat. Just rumors of an S-class bounty hunter. Jiraiya shrugged just a bit before studying the board, and smirked slightly, as he shifted a piece. No one knows for sure, as he doesn't really tend to leave behind witnesses, but he's supposedly been around a long time. Asuma whistled softly, and chuckled just a bit, as he nodded his head. Must be good then. Won't know unless one of us faces him, and lives to tell. Jiraiya responded simply, and shrugged just slightly before sighing softly. Anyway, wait, Asuma-sensei has a bounty on his head? Ino spoke up, staring incredulously at the two so calmly discussing things. Yup, gotta be more than 30 million Ryo? Asuma looked over questioningly at Jiraiya, who nodded slightly in answer. Yeah, over 30 million. Only one in the village with a higher bounty on their head is Kakashi. What about super bushy brows? Naruto blinked slightly, as he quickly consumed some rice. Isn't he really strong too? At the confused look on Jiraiya's face, Asuma spoke up with a chuckle. Guy. When he suddenly snickered, and nodded in understanding, the Hokage's son turned his head, and smirked at Naruto. Tell me, kid, would you admit having your ass kicked by someone like Guy? I know I wouldn't. Kin spoke up quickly, shuddering slightly, as she leaned back against Naruto. I guess. Naruto admitted with a wince, and shook his head. If he trained Lee to be that strong though, isn't he really strong? Oh yeah? Asuma nodded his head, and grinned slightly. When Guy goes all out, you don't want to be on the receiving end of things. Huh, that Gates thing? Naruto blinked a bit then shook his head. Fuzzy Brows was in really bad shape after he used it, even before that Gara guy did a number on him. Alright, enough chit-chat. Anko spoke up, smirking slightly, as she shook her head. Hurry up, and finish your meal so we can get to the fun stuff. Bah! You just wanna throw kunai at me again. Naruto shot out an accusation, as he glared at the woman. Yeah and? Anko countered with a feral grin on her lips. Well, he's picked up the water walking exercise already. Yugugo noted casually while glancing at Asuma. How's he doing on leaf cutting? Moved him to rock cutting. Asuma grunted slightly with a slight smirk. Kid picks things up damn fast. 6 months worth of training mastered in a few hours. Right, looks like I need to grab Tenzo. Yugugo noted with a slight smirk on her lips. So, still skeptical about him being able to do what we have planned? Heh, I should've known better than to bet against the brat. Asuma chuckled softly, as he took a drag on his cigarette for a moment before leaning back. I'm a believer. I'll work on getting his cutting stronger while you get Tenzo. Oh, I love it when a plan comes together. Anko grinned savagely, as she stuck a skewer of dango in her mouth, and held it happily clenched in her teeth. Well damn. Tenzo starred in absolute shock from beneath his mask, as he watched the massive waterfall he'd created explode in an uniform horizontal line, as the string of blonde-headed figures sent a massive cut into the stone itself. This kid is picking things up quickly, kinda scary isn't it? Asuma smirked slightly, as he took a slow drag on his cigarette, as the string of Narutos cheered triumphantly. If he wasn't such a good kid I'd probably be downright terrified. So, what next? Tenzo offered up, as he settled curiously on the ground, and watched the figures dancing on the long wooden log he'd created. Think you can alter the waterfall like this? Asuma lightly used one of his trench knives to carve a pattern onto the ground. Now that he's got some idea about what we're doing, we're going to start working on the actual technique. Sure, it should be interesting. The ANBU man agreed with a nod of his head before he shifted his fingers through a series of signs, and performed his technique, as suddenly the waterfall jerked backwards into a series of steps, which condensed down into a thicker flow. Brats, Asuma's voice called out a moment later, catching the clone's attention. Gather round for the next step. They were both sweating, the light catching on the glistening beads of moisture that clung to their flesh, twin grins on their faces, identical in so many ways. One, covered in half-healed cuts, and dried blood where open wounds stung from salty sweat. The other, panting softly in exertion, as she nonetheless chuckled softly. Damn brat, you're down to what is still going strong, huh? Anko laughed softly, and shook her head, as she stared back at the boy in absolute wonder. Not that I couldn't have killed you at least 1,000 times over by now? Naruto finished for her with a grin. Now, where would the fun be for you in that? Besides, I'm just dodging, and throwing no chakra, remember? You're getting better, you've almost knocked me a few times. Anko responded with a grinning nod. Anyway, time for a break. But I was getting warmed up. Naruto pouted visibly, as he crossed his arms about his chest. Is he serious? Ino turned her head from where she was laying out on the ground, her hair matted with sweat, as bruises welled up across her body. From what I can tell, Kin offered up, as she lay out next to the girl, glancing at her lightly out of the corner of her eyes. Yes, scary. Ino shuddered slightly, and stared back at the blonde boy. Seriously, where does he get all that stamina? He was very active growing up. Yugugo offered neutrally, before glancing back at the two. Alright, that's enough of a break. Ugh, she's a damn slave driver. Ino half whined even, as she pushed herself up, before wincing, as she felt a sudden rap on the back of her head from the ANBU woman's sheathed blade. And here I thought you wanted training, Yugugo spat out sarcastically, as she glared down at the girl. I do. Ino shot back, growling slightly, as she glared. Just not all of us here have his stamina. Kin paused a moment before glancing over at an amused-looking Jiraiya. So, you're gonna interrogate me still? Well, I had planned on it. I just didn't think you'd be pushing yourself this hard. He noted with a light chuckle, and a rubbing of his chin. What the hell? Hey, mind keeping the princess here busy for a while? I need to start getting some info out of the bitch here. Ugh, how come you let him call you that? Ino grumbled slightly, as she looked at Kin in disbelief. Because I am one? Kin offered up with a shrug of her shoulders, as she smirked back at Ino. Didn't I already make that abundantly clear? Ino glared back at the girl even, as she gave an angrily nod of assent. I gotta admit, Bimbo-kin smirked at the rise in the girl's irritation, her smirk only growing in response. You suck, but at least you're trying not to. Jiraiya blinked a moment, before his soft snickers awoke into a perverted giggle, as he grinned back at Kin, his eyes dancing merrily. Kin took a moment, blinked slightly back at the man, before glancing over at Ino thoughtfully, lightly tapping her finger against her lower lip in consideration before she shook her head. Nah, Bimbo here doesn't strike me as the kinda girl willing to suck that way. Too much of a princess. Ino blinked slightly, confusion written on her face before her eyes widened, and realization, as she blushed a bright crimson, glaring back at the girl. What girl you pervert? Oi, crazy lady! Naruto glanced over at the lightly panting Anko, as another kunai cut across his arm. Oh, damn it! What the hell are they talking about? Are you kidding me? Anko paused for a moment, and stared back at the boy, her eyes incredulous before she burst out laughing. Oh man, that's just ah. What? What's so damn funny? Naruto growled softly, as he glared at the woman laughing so eagerly back at him. You seriously don't know? Yugugo was staring at the boy from beneath her mask, her eye twitching softly, before she turned her head, about to speak before her voice died when her gaze settled on Jiraiya. The Sanin's face was locked in a look of shocked, horrified disbelief, as he worked his mouth slowly open and shut in shock, struggling to come up with the words to respond to the situation. A soft whimper escaping his mouth, the man turned his head, looking in shocked disbelief at Yugao and Anko. A moment later, his look shifted, turning imploringly onto Kin, as he held his hands up and gestured repeatedly towards the blonde boy. What's wrong with the old pervert? Naruto asked, looking curiously around him, as he scratched the back of his head. He's acting like I broke him or something. You seriously have no clue what bitcha here was talking about. Ino stared at the boy, who shook his head cluelessly back at her while she hung her head, before biting back a snicker. Man, was forehead ever wrong about you being a pervert? Yes, I'm working on changing that, but he stubbornly refuses to give in. Kin noted before shaking her head in exaggerated sadness. I've even had to tell him, quite blatantly, that he's free to grope me whenever he wants, and all he does is, well, that. Kin gestured, and Ino's eyes traveled over to where Naruto had rapidly developed a look bordering on an impersonation of Jiraiya's reaction. Blinking slightly at the blushing, wide-eyed fish look on the boy's face, Ino finished registering Kin's words before turning back towards the girl, and staring with wide eyes at her. Wait, you not only gave him permission to do that to you, you actually encouraged him to? Kin casually nodded her head, as she hummed out her response, shaking her head slightly in annoyance before shrugging a bit. Ugh, I swear, it's going to take forever to get through that damn thick skull of his. How the hell can you just? I mean, Ino struggled to wrap her mind around the concept. What the hell? What? Kin offered up lazily, as she smirked back at the girl. What's the matter, princess? They do not teach you about kinks and seduction tactics in your academy? Actually, those tend to be supplementary courses given post-academy graduation. Yugugo noted neutrally, even, as she practically smirked beneath her mask. A concession to some of the more vocal civilians against teaching such things to girls who might not even become genin. Are you shitting me? Kin started from Yugugo over to a snickering Anko who shook her head in confirmation. Nope, Anko agreed casually, her grin spread wide about her lips. Though, to be honest, it's not like you girls are generally developed enough to take that option until you've filled out more. Hey, crazy examiner lady, Kin called out, grinning with a cheerful sadism. Wanna help me traumatize the little princess here with the facts of life? Oh, tempting. Anko grinned evilly, as she lightly rubbed at her chin. Not like she couldn't use some seduction tactics since she's rather, well, I swear, if you say useless, I'll possess you, and have you pose for him. Ino growled, as she pointed over towards the suddenly very attentive Jiraiya. Will you do it if I mention it? Jiraiya asked hopefully, as he twisted out of the way of one of Anko's kunai. Hell no. Ino countered before glaring back at Anko. You think I'm gonna let you just hit me with that attack, princess? Anko smirked softly, as she grinned in amusement back at the girl. You think I can't sweet-talk daddy into telling me where you live? Ino countered with a smirk of her own on her lips. Anko paused a moment at that, opening her lips almost instinctively before grinning viciously back at the girl. I think, little princess, you'd better think very carefully about just what I might do to you for something like that. The woman's smirk grew into a positively sadistic leer, as she continued. Because I already know where you live. Pinching the bridge of his nose, Naruto sighed softly before he spoke up. You, and the rest of the genin girls suck at seduction. Before the outraged girl could respond, the blonde boy continued. One word, Sasuke. Ino froze at that, opening, and shutting her mouth in a rapid blinking fashion, as the gears in her head were audibly grinding out. Finally she blinked owlishly back at the boy, and bit off a reluctant growl. Fine. Shaking his head again, Naruto grumbled a bit, as he glared around him. Now, can we please stop talking about this stuff, and get some actual training done? You perverts are bad enough, as is. Perverts? The female voices rang out with voices ranging from anger, to annoyance to amusement. Well, not you, Ambiyu-chan. Naruto responded quickly before gesturing to the rest of the group. Just the rest of them. Pausing a moment, the masked woman seemed to consider this a moment, before nodding her head in agreement. True enough, I suppose. Snickering softly, Anko suddenly grabbed Ino by the back of her shirt, and hefted her up. Hey Yugago-chan. Keep the brat busy for a while. I'm gonna take a break, and give the princess here an education. At the ANBU woman's nod, Anko grinned even broader at Kin. Wanna come? Sounds like fun. Kin agreed happily, as she stretched out. Hey, let me down, you crazy bitch. Ino's voice rose angry, defiant into the air, as she immediately struggled to escape Anko's hold. What the hell are you doing? Oh, relax, princess. Anko laughed softly, her eyes gleaming there on her face, as she smiled happily, as the sweat fell down across her face. Us perverts are just going to have ourselves a little talk. This should be fun. Kin agreed with a happy chirp. Think of all the subjects we can cover. Indeed, my young disciple, indeed. Anko gave a sage nod of her head, as she smiled wickedly down at Kin, and the three quickly vanished, hauling the still protesting Ino out of sight. I should be afraid, shouldn't I, ANBU-chan? Naruto noted with a slow shiver of dread dripping down his spine. Absolutely terrified, kid. The confirmation came swiftly, and simply from behind the ANBU's mask, as she lightly drew out her sword, and turned her head towards the boy. Well, we've seen how you fare in dodging kunai. Let's see how you do against the blade, shall we? Will it take my mind off of the increasingly bad scenarios I'm coming up with in my head about how this is going to come back to screw me over? Hope blossomed in the blonde's voice, as he looked up pleadingly at the masked woman. Can't hurt now, can it? The woman responded neutrally, as she lightly shrugged her shoulders, and smirked back at the boy beneath her mask. You know, you shouldn't lie like that, ANBU-chan, Naruto chided lightly, as he settled into a ready position. We both know this is going to end up hurting me a lot. True, but think of how much faster you learn. A trace of Anko-like humor slipped into the woman's voice, as she suddenly lashed out with the sword, drawing a thin line of blood against Naruto's arm, as he scrambled out of the way. And you need to learn to avoid every attack after all. You never know when someone might do something like, poison their weapons, you know? Paling for a moment, Naruto nonetheless grit his teeth, and moved himself, as quickly as he could out of the way of the woman's swipes, the sweat once more beginning to bead, and flow across his skin, as it mixed with the lines of crimson that began to blossom on his skin. He wasn't going to give in. He wasn't going to stop. He was going to prove to everyone that he was worthy of becoming Hokage. Blood welled up across Ino's face when she eventually stormed back into the training ground, only to stop, and stare in open-mouthed shock at the sight she beheld. While she'd been away, Naruto had stripped down to nothing but his pants. His forehead protector carefully laid off to the side folded neatly into place while his body glistened from a combination of blood and sweat. Still, it was the look on his face that really threw her. It was one of simple, burning determination, as he twisted and moved around the blade's slashing strikes, doing little more than wincing now, and then when he felt a new line of crimson open up on his skin. It was a look not of the normal, childish petulance she'd grown used to seeing in the academy when he stubbornly dug in against someone, just for the sake of refusing to give in, but one of an almost grim determination she'd seen at times on the faces of her father and his teammates. Kinda weird to see, isn't it? Kin's voice was suddenly hovering above her ear, a smug smirk on her lips, as she watched over Ino's shoulder. He acts like such an idiot, a goofball, but then he goes, and keeps surprising you. Heh, at least I know I won't ever be bored. After a moment's consideration, she shook her head, and sighed slightly, just frustrated. What, is the princess here drooling over the brat? Anko popped up next to Kin, as she glanced from Ino towards Naruto, her lips quivering slightly, as a bit of mischief fell across them. My, looks like you might have some competition, little bitch? PFT, as if. Kin waved her hand dismissively, as she watched Ino glare at them, as the faintest tinge of a blush blossomed across her cheeks. Me? Interested in Naruto? Ino growled slightly, as she glared at the pair who smirked back at her in an eerie unison. No way. Sasuke-kun is the only one for me. See? Kin gestured towards the girl with a shrug, and a grin, as she smirked back at Anko. Still a complete fangirl. Heh, no competition at all. A shame, competition can be fun. Anko observed with a slow, innocent smile on her lips, as she lightly shifted about where she stood. Though, completely understandable. Like the brat said, you suck at seduction. Of course, if she was good at them, she'd probably end up being sent on all those high-profile seduction missions where she'd have to sleep with the target, then use that funky of hers to rummage around in their heads, Kin noted with a cheerful smile on her face. So, maybe we should help her become a better kunoichi? My, that does seem like the best way to go. Anko agreed with a sage nod of her head. And getting laid would probably help her unwind some. Are you kidding me? Kin gave the woman an incredulous look. You'd have to have a hair trigger to get off on most of the guys that are targeted for things like that. Fat, sloven, no staying power, all that greasy sweat. A shudder rippled across the girl's form, as she made a face. And the smell. She paused before grinning viciously at a pale Ino. On second thought, it sounds perfect for the bimbo here. Hey! Ino growled back at the girl, her eyes flashing, as she snarled at the girl. Unlike you, I have no interest in being some kind of sex toy. She paused a moment, before smirking a bit. Though if I was, I probably wouldn't be getting all frustrated because my master wouldn't play with me. Kin's eyes flashed for a moment, as she narrowed her eyes back at the blonde girl, while Anko merely allowed her grin to grow even further on her lips. Well, you both do have excellent points. Why don't we ask the brat then? You must be crazy if you think I'm getting involved in that. Naruto shot back, as he shifted away from another swipe, his distraction earning him a deeper cut, as he grunted softly in pain. Besides, Ino doesn't know when to shut up, and King-chan's a creepy pervert. Creepy pervert? Jiraiya offered up with a smirk on his face, as he lightly scribbled some notes into his book. Yeah. Less disgusting pervert like you, more creepy pervert like the boy suddenly paused a moment, his eyes widening, as he managed to quickly head off what he originally intended to say with, like a crazy lady here, nice save. Yugigo noted with a slight smirk of her lips while she pulled her blade back, and wiped the boy's blood from it with a clean folded piece of cloth. Humph. Anko snorted softly, and rolled her eyes a bit, as she gave a bemused smirk back at the boy. So you think I'm a pervert, do you? Creepy pervert, Naruto responded simply, as he crossed his arms about his chest, and nodded firmly. Forgotten the first thing you did to me already? Bah, it's called fucking with people's heads. Anko shot back, and smirked even wider. I was under the impression you liked doing it yourself. Naruto stared back at the woman, for a moment, opening his mouth, as if about to say something before suddenly snapping his jaw shut, as he caught his chin in consideration. Frowning for a moment, he scrunched his eyelids into a wary squint, before he offered up a reluctant observation. And you dress that way because it means people have to acknowledge you. Something like that. Anko agreed with a smirk, even, as she wiggled her eyebrows slightly. Plus, it's fun to mess with the perverts. Yeah, it is. Naruto agreed before he could really stop himself, before suddenly scratching the back of his head. I mean, heh? Well, if you want a pervert to mess with, Naruto-sama Kin offered up, almost leering back at the boy with a feral smirk on her lips. Naruto simply glared back at the girl, whose leer turned into a smug smirk on her lips while she shifted her hand down to her hip, while she cocked her head to the side, as he growled back at her. You know, that's getting annoying. The girl looked back at the boy for a moment before sighing, and shrugging just slightly, as she glanced over towards Ino. I just can't win with him, can I? Don't look at me. Ino snorted softly, as she shook her head in exasperation. I'm not the creepy, crazy pervert that wants him to treat her like a piece of property. No, you're just the one that's obsessed with a boy who's got a stick shoved so far up his ass he might, as well be gay. Anko's voice cut in, as the special smiled ever so sweetly at the blonde girl. In fact, from what I saw, he showed more interest in the brat here. Anko jerked her thumb at a rapidly paling Naruto before continuing, than he did anyone. Hey! Leave me out of this! Naruto cut in quickly. The bastard isn't gay. No way. Sasuke-kun is definitely interested in girls. Ino quickly shrieked, as she glared back at Anko, before Naruto couldn't help but cut in. I know I said he wasn't gay, and this will probably come out wrong, but the only thing Sasuke seems interested in right now is his brother. Naruto shifted slightly at the sudden looks of horror that rippled across the group, mixed with looks of understanding from the older Nin. Well, it was hard to tell with Yugigo, but he was pretty sure she was, as well. His brother? Kin couldn't help but look a bit ill, before she snickered a bit, and smirked at Ino. Man, you really can pick him, can't you, bimbo? But. Ino immediately began to protest, her brain seemingly stuck on that bit of information, and unable to proceed further. You know, I expected it from Kin-chan, I really did, Naruto noted, as he lightly palmed his face in his hand. I mean, she's not from around here, but seriously what the hell, Ino? Even I know about how Sasuke became an orphan. Oh? Ino blushed brightly, and couldn't help but hang her head in embarrassment. Eh? Kin blinked slightly, confusion washing across her face, as her nose scrunched up slightly. What are you talking about? The brat's referring to the Uchiha massacre. Anko responded, every trace of humor gone from her voice, as her lips were pressed into a hard, thin line. When Sasuke's entire clan, parents, and family were all killed by his older brother, Itachi. What actually happened? An entire clan, wiped out by one of its members. Kin blinked up, and stared, as she looked around seeing the slight nodding of heads among the older generation. I thought that was just some kind of twisted rumor. Afraid not, kiddo. Jiraiya shook his head, and sighed softly before offering a slight shrug in response. It's been 5 years now, and suddenly, I'm starting to wonder if I was safer and sound. Kin noted, as she made a light face, and sighed softly, shaking her head with a grumble. First this village created Orochimaru, now some other insane, especially powerful ninja? We have a larger number of deviants, I suppose you could say. Yugugo admitted, as she glanced from a smirking Anko to an innocently whistling Jiraiya. But at the same time, we do produce consistently higher quality shinobi. We just tend to be a bit eccentric, Jiraiya added with a slight quirk of his lips, his eyes twinkling slightly. Right, eccentric. Kin muttered slightly under her breath before looking thoughtful for a moment. Well, that would explain the bimbo here. Hey! Ino growled softly, as she glared back at the girl. What the hell do you mean by that? Well, for one thing, you're obviously lacking in your taste in guys, Kin noted with a smirk, before smiling innocently at the blonde girl. Plus, you're obviously trying, and failing I might add, to repress your perverted desires for Naruto-sama here. As if, Ino glared back at the girl even, as her face flushed crimson, and she glanced lightly towards the oldishly blinking Naruto. Oh, denial while blushing, Anko crowded, as she turned, and glanced at a still masked Yugugo. What do you say, confirmation? It would appear so. The masked woman agreed with a nod of her head. Though, you missed out the discreet glances towards him, as she said it. How long until you think she'll be replacing all her Sasuke posters with Naruto ones? Anko continued, ignoring the growing look of horror blossoming on both Naruto and Ino's faces. Well, she's still in the denial phase, Yugugo responded, lightly tapping her lower lip. She still has all those other pesky ones to get through. I do not like Naruto. Not like that. Ino immediately protested yet again, as she glared back at the women. Please let her be telling the truth, Naruto offered up pleadingly, as he turned towards where Jiraiya was visibly restraining himself from laughing. They're joking, right? Afraid not, kid. Jiraiya responded with a growing smirk, as he reached down and ruffled the boy's sweat-drenched hair. Congratulations, you're turning into a little heartbreaker. Eyes widened in horror, Naruto involuntarily took a step back, panic quickly filling his eyes. Oh hell no. She'll try to turn me into a bastard. The females turned, and blinked at Naruto for a moment, as their reactions varied from one to the next. Kin's lips were twitching, visibly towards a smug smirk. Anko was rolling her eyes at the boy's reaction, while Yugugo's arms crossed about her chest, as her face remained unreadable beneath her mask. Reactions that stayed on their face, even, as Ino's huffing voice spoke up. You say it like it would be a bad thing if you were more like Sasuke-kun. As everyone's faces turned in disbelief onto the girl, Naruto's finger rose up, pointing accusingly towards Ino. See, she even admits it. Humph, I don't see what's the big deal. Ino grumbled softly, as she crossed her arms about her chest, and glared mildly at the other blonde. I blame you for this. Naruto turned his attention, and pointed firmly at Kin, who blinked back at him. What? Why the hell are you blaming me for her being a dumb bimbo? Kin stared back at the boy incredulously, as her mouth hung in shock. All I did was point out the truth. Yes, but if you hadn't, I would have remained blissfully unaware of her intent to turn me into another Sasuke. Naruto shot back before turning his head, and glaring at Ino. And you? Don't even think about it. No way in hell I'm gonna act like him. Humph, as if you could be. As cool as Ino immediately began to counter, as she tightened her arms about her chest. You know, strictly speaking, Jiraiya was busy scribbling away at his notebook, as he spoke, not quite glancing up at the group. The brat here has far more potential than the Uchiha. What? Ino's screech earned flinches from both Naruto and Kin, as Anko only blinked slightly at the outraged response. A princess has some lungs on her, I'll give her that. Yawning slightly, Anko lightly wiggled her pinky into her ear. Hopefully Asuma can teach her to shut up before she blows the whole mission. She's still a brat, so no worries just yet. Jiraiya waved his hand, as he blinked a bit at where Naruto was staring at him in slack-jawed amazement. What, is there something on my face? You said. Naruto's mouth worked wordlessly, as he pointed at the man, before he looked over at Anko, as he gestured towards the white-haired man. He said. Yes, he did. Anko nodded her head, smirking back at the boy with her eyes positively dancing in amusement. And he's right. Jiraiya blinked slightly, looking in confusion from Naruto to Anko. What's got him so? You said he had more potential than the Uchiha? Anko supplied a soft little chuckle while she lightly stretched back. All right, break's over. Back to work. Oh, what's wrong with the truth? Jiraiya huffed slightly, and shook his head just a bit, as he glanced over at the glaring Yamanaka. And girly? Grow up. The academy never means anything in the long run. But Ino immediately began to protest, as she stared up at the brat pulled off 6 months of training in a day. 1 dy. Jiraiya emphasized the words, as he shook his head. Not even Sensei could do that. And if the god of shinobi couldn't, think about where that puts the brat. Ino was left standing there with that thought, her mouth opening and shutting in slow succession, as she started again at Naruto, and wondered exactly what it was she should do. How long are you going to keep giving me the silent treatment, Naruto-sama? Kin pouted towards Naruto's back, as the boy stiffly lay in bed, ignoring the way the dark-haired girl tried to squirm more intimately against him. Come on, say something. She lightly began to poke him with one slender finger, as he refused to even look at her. Please? Something? Anything? When he continued to say nothing, she crossed her arms about her chest, and pouted again. I told you I was sorry. I never expected her to actually do something that stupid. Slowly, Naruto rolled over, and glared at her with those crystalline blue eyes, through the pitch-black bangs falling into his face. Wincing slightly, Kin shrank back from the look, and whimpered just a bit. Would it make you feel any better to give me another spanking? Why would I do something that would encourage you to do something like this in the future? Naruto finally spoke, his voice flat, as he continued that angry glare at the girl in his bed. This time, she winced even more visibly, squirming slightly, as she ducked her head. Honestly, I didn't think she'd actually do it. She had everything in my size. Naruto countered flatly, still glaring at the girl. Well, I did goad her just a bit, but I was just fucking with her. Kin whined softly before she poked against his stomach. Besides, aren't you supposed to be the prankster? How did you not notice she'd put the dye in your shampoo, and stolen your clothes? I had to spend the day looking like a bastard. Naruto growled even more angrily at the girl. I swear, when I get my hands on her, can I at least watch? Kin asked hopefully, as she blushed brightly, and squirmed slightly. Since you won't know, why is it that every girl I meet is a pervert? Naruto slumped slightly, as he seemed to deflate, and shrink back into the bed. You're lucky? Kin offered helpfully, as she grinned just a bit at the boy before suddenly, impulsively pushing forward, and nuzzling against his chest. And cute. I'm not forgiving you that easily, you know. He grumbled softly, as he felt the warmth of her arms snaking around his chest, and clinging tightly to him. Cute, cuddly, wonderful, determined. Kin paused a moment, before suddenly opening, and biting down hard on his chest through his shirt before letting go. But you sure as hell better not start thinking I'm just going to fucking behave for you because you glare at me. Oh, Naruto growled, as he suddenly pushed her off his chest, growling, as his eyes flashed dangerously at her. What the fuck was that for? I just told you. Kin lifted her head, and sniffed softly, as she lightly glared at you. You're supposed to be keeping me in line, not the other way around. I'm not your fucking babysitter, I'm your fucking slave, bitch. He growled again, glaring at her even harder, as he rubbed the spot on his chest she'd bitten into. Yeah, but I'm your bitch, remember? Kin smirked a bit, as she suddenly pushed his shirt up, ignoring his sputtering protests, as she lightly began to run her tongue against the reddened flesh, before kissing it better. There better? I just don't get you at all. Naruto just stared at the girl, as she grinned impishly back at him, his cheeks flushing brightly. Nothing about you makes sense. You never act the way I expect you to. You want me to treat you in a way that would get me beaten into a pulp, and you just are. Kin grinned slightly at him for a moment before leaning, and carefully pulling his shirt back down before nuzzling against his chest again. You'll get it eventually, master. I'm just an impatient bitch. I really don't get you. Jiraiya sighed in no small amount of frustration, as he shook his head. Damn it, you'd think with everything else he's able to pull off, he'd be able to pull out some of that chakra to put into Toad's summoning. Perhaps that's not how the fourth intended for things to go. Yugogo offered easily enough, as she watched where the completely exhausted Naruto was still struggling, as he summoned up nothing more than little tadpoles. No, it should allow it. I guess he just doesn't have incentive to really pull it out. From what I understand, the last time Jiraiya paused for a moment, lightly rubbing against his chin before nodding his head. Well, that's an idea, though I think I'll have to make sure that someone's down at the bottom to catch him just in case. Just in case? The A&B woman frowned behind her mask, as she studied the man with quickly narrowing eyes. What are you thinking, Jiraiya-sama? The waterfall was a canyon. The man responded simply, as he considered Naruto carefully. He's already mastered that technique that Enko-chan thought up, as well as the first step to the other with the few wind that Asuma taught him. As well, if we do it today, if something goes wrong, and we're not able to stop him from being hurt, he'll still have time to recover properly with medical attention. That's a bit callous, you know. Yugogo noted carefully, as she lightly stroked her thumb across the grip of her blade. Got any better ideas? Jiraiya countered, as he shook his head, and sighed, as he lightly hung his head. I'm rather out of ideas, and as apparently he needs something extreme to trigger it, I don't particularly like it. But, as long as you allow us to make sure we can catch him before he ends up too badly off, Yugogo paused before sighing softly. When do you want to do this? Now. The man answered simply, as Yugogo nodded her head, before she moved over to speak to Anko and Asuma. Hey brat, you insane son of a bitch! Kin's voice screamed in fury, as she watched Naruto falling backwards over the edge, even as she felt herself restrained by the man's strong arm wrapped about her waist. Naruto-sama, relax girlie. Jiraiya shook his head, as he held her firmly in place. He should be fine. Should be fine? You just knocked him off a fucking cliff. Kin shifted her attention to the man, trying to claw her fingers at anything she could. And I made sure Anko-chan, Asuma, and Yugogo-chan were down there to catch him if he didn't unlock the door. Jiraiya responded placatingly before suddenly letting his words drift off, as he stared in absolute shock at the girl. Just as a red glow had risen up from the canyon, and the foreboding pulse of demonic chakra had flitted against his senses, suddenly the girl's struggles had stopped being so easily ignored. When her nails turned into claws he released her, and jumped back to watch, as she immediately dropped down to all fours, glaring at him with slitted crimson eyes. Suddenly fang teeth glinted visibly, as she snarled, a pulsing, menacing cloak of crimson chakra flowing around her. Jiraiya paused for a moment, staring in absolute shock at the girl, before he couldn't help but smile proudly. Man, I'm such a genius! The girl tensed, preparing to launch herself at the object of her anger, before suddenly there was a rush of motion, as a massive form launched itself out of the canyon, flying through the air, and arcing gracefully towards a section of forest. Then suddenly the earth shook from the impact of the mightiest of the toad summons. Naruto had summoned forth the toad boss, Gamabunta. Heh, I knew that kid had potential. Jiraiya grinned broadly before turning back towards the more than slightly feral Kin. There, look girlie, he's fine. Now why don't you calm down, and we'll talk about this rationally. The angry growl that left the girl's throat was her only response, before she suddenly lunged forward at him, claws extended. Well, so much for doing this in a peaceful way. Jiraiya sighed, as he stepped on the girl, and struck at the base of her neck, knocking her in one fluid, neat motion. Well, this just gets more and more interesting. Oh, I can't believe I'm looking forward to some research that doesn't involve bathing women. Chuckling softly, he picked up the girl, and shook his head, as he began to make his way towards the brat's apartment. She did what? Hiruzen Sarutobi was staring at his former pupil with incredulous eyes, as the white-haired grinned like a proud father in front of him. As soon as Naruto accessed Kyuubi's chakra, she was able to, as well. Since she was already upset with me, she followed the emotional response, and her body enveloped her in a chakra cloak. Jiraiya's grin was almost insane, as he grinned back at his former teacher. Do you understand what that means? She's able to access Naruto-kun's chakra. The Hokage pursed his lips in quiet consideration, which gives her access to a great deal of his potential. Oh yeah? Jiraiya's grin was just as insane as before, as he nodded his head. I've got an absolutely crazy idea too. He paused a moment, letting the anticipation build for an instant before his eyes gleamed, as he continued. I'm going to make her a seal mistress. And this is such a crazy idea, why? Hiruzen arched his brow, as he lightly puffed at his pipe. A seal mistress would indeed help Naruto-kun, if she's actually as loyal as you say she is, but she's got an earth affinity. Jiraiya supplied, his eyes gleaming with that unholy light. And with access to a sized chakra supply? I checked, his chakra's leaking into hers already, the same way the Kyuubi's leaks into his. Her chakra reserves are building plus, with that access to his chakra on top of it? Imagine it being able to fill a battlefield with seals just beneath the ground, seals the enemy can't see. That kind of control, Sarutobi responded, as he cut the man off, shaking his head. It's a very interesting idea, to be sure, Jiraiya-kun, but the level of control and practice it would take to allow her to inscribe those seals with the speed that you need, it will take years. Jiraiya agreed, nodding his head, as he rubbed his hands together, even as he looked on the verge of cackling out loud. Decades, Sarutobi corrected his former student. If not centuries that she won't have. Ah, but my esteemed old monkey, you're forgetting one thing. Jiraiya shot back, as he waggled his finger. Shadow clones. The shadow clone technique is almost useless for things like that. You know this, Jiraiya-kun. Sarutobi countered with a sigh. Not the Naruto way. Jiraiya countered with a broad grin on his lips. The kid's already proven he can pull it off. Haven't you been reading those progress reports that Yugogo-chan's been sending you? Excuse me if I've been a little busy with preparing for this invasion. We almost lost Haikun to that damned Sanjounin. Sarutobi growled slightly, as he shook his head. Fortunately we had tails on this Baki, so we were able to get him stabilized, and to a medicine in time. Naruto used his shadow clone training method to master the leaf-cutting exercise in a matter of hours. Jiraiya enthused with his eyes gleaming. He cleared rock cutting a short time later. Mastered water cutting the next day. Hell, Enko-chan, she came up with a technique that puts him up there with that Gaara kid defensively, that only Naruto can use. Beyond that, Jiraiya paused a moment, before grinning broadly. He's mastered the first claw of the Wind Tiger technique. Do you actually think you could do this with her? Sarutobi asked carefully, as he attempted to wrap his mind around the thought of Naruto, childish, mischievous, and irresponsible Naruto pulling off the things Jiraiya described. Naruto is going to change the world. Jiraiya answered with a nod of his head, as he couldn't help but grin even more. He's going to surpass his father. Of that I have no doubt whatsoever. What do you want me to do then? The Hokage asked warily, as he studied one of his prized pupils. The details that followed made the old man stare in absolute shock more than once, as to the insanity and the audacity of the man's plan. Still, in the end, he couldn't help but smile. If it worked, then perhaps he could finally feel the weight of Minamoto-kun's eyes lightening from how they bore down upon him. Kin-chan? Naruto blinked slightly, as he caught sight of the girl laid out on his bed, soundly asleep from the look of things. Frowning slightly, the boy let loose a quiet sigh, as he shook his head before stepping over, lightly poking against her side. Come on, wake up. You need to get changed before we get to sleep. Out of the hospital already, brat? Jiraiya smirked, as he appeared behind the boy. My, that was quick. Don't do that. Naruto spun around, shouting loudly, as suddenly Kin was jolted to awareness by his yell. What? Naruto-sama, you're all right. Kin immediately shot out, and grabbed hold of Naruto, clutching at his chest. I thought. I told her that you were fine, but she didn't want to listen to me. Jiraiya noted with a sigh, and a shake of his head. Really, you'd think, you pushed me off a cliff? Naruto countered angrily, as he glared at the man, while gently running his fingers through man's hair. And if you hadn't accessed the chakra, Enko-chan, Yugogo-chan, and Asuma were waiting to make sure you didn't die. Jiraiya countered with a smirk. But as you did, oh, I am such a genius. You call throwing Naruto-sama off a cliff a work of genius? Kin suddenly glared angrily at the man once more, as she almost pulled away from the blonde boy's embrace. No, I call that seal I put on you absolutely genius. The man corrected with a positively zealous gleam in his eyes. Tell me, girlie, what do you remember? Kin opened her mouth to answer, before pausing, frowning, as she tried to bring up the event in her mind. I was really angry, and I felt strong, powerful, more so than I've ever felt before. Everything else is really hazy though. You can access the brat's chakra, Jiraiya answered for her, as he rubbed his hands together in a positively gleeful manner. You pulled out a chakra cloak. What? Kin stared at the man for a moment before shaking her head. No. You imagined it. There's no way. I know what I saw. You even started to exhibit the secondary traits it does in the state. Jiraiya rubbed his hands together. As soon as this invasion stupidity is done with, oh yes, you my dear, are going to become something the world has never seen before. The white-haired Sanin's eyes positively gleamed, as he almost cackled. You wanted to be strong, girlie? Well, guess what, you're going to get your wish. You're going to end up stronger than my old teammate could imagine. How strong are we talking about? Kin put forth carefully, a gleam of her own flashing into her eyes, as she lightly loosened her grip on Naruto, but didn't let go. Well, it depends on you, and how hard you're willing to work, they answered before grinning evilly. But unlike Orochimaru, I want my students to grow past me. That's the greatest triumph of a truly good teacher. I've done it before. Jiraiya paused for a moment, before he locked his eyes meaningfully onto Naruto. And if you two are willing to work for it to truly put your all into it, I think you have the potential to surpass him. After letting those words sink in for a moment, Jiraiya couldn't help but add a sly smile to his face. So, tell me, are you kiddies interested in trying to shine brighter than the yellow flash? The light that shone in their eyes past the disbelieving stares told him everything he needed to know. Ah, come in, Naruto-kun. The Hokage smiled softly towards the nervously grinning blonde boy, and the masked girl who followed him with a visible trepidation in her step. And this must be your little Kin-chan? Yeah, this is Kin-chan. Naruto agreed with a nod of his head before glancing from the girl to Sarutobi. So, what did you want to talk about, old man? Kin turned her head, and stared incredulously at the boy. You call the god a shinobi, old man? Yeah? Naruto shrugged his shoulders, as he nervously scratched the back of his head. He was an old man, long before he was Hokage to me. Is there anything normal about you, Naruto-sama? Kin stared in downright disbelief at the boy who owned her, before shaking her head, as he started to answer. No, never mind, I already know the answer to that. No, there isn't. Naruto's open mouth turned into a pout, as he crossed his arms about his chest. You say it like that's a bad thing, Kin-chan. Sarutobi couldn't help it, he laughed softly at the pair, as his eyes danced with visible amusement. Oh, Naruto-kun, you certainly do find yourself in the most interesting of situations. Yeah, well, Naruto shrugged helplessly, as he nervously scratched the back of his head. I don't mean to? Right, sure you don't. Kin shot sarcastically, before suddenly remembering whose presence she was in, as she cringed visibly, and suddenly bowed to the old man. I apologize for forgetting my place, Hokage-sama. Quite all right. The old man assured her with a wave of his hand. You simply chose to take your cues from Naruto-kun, which is fine. For a moment, the man puffed at the pipe on his mouth, before he carefully regarded the pair. So, my former student has been telling me some interesting things about the two of you, and his plans for you both. Kin blinked slightly at the man for a moment, before realization hit her like a flash of lightning, as she couldn't help blurting out. You trained Orochimaru. Sarutobi sighed slightly, as he hung his head for a brief moment, before nodding it quietly. Yes, I did. My greatest failure was not stopping him from becoming the monster he became. Suddenly, everything seemed to click into place for Kin, as she stared at the kindly old man in front of her, and she couldn't help but blurt out. This whole invasion, he's doing it just to kill you. Just? No. Sarutobi shook his head with a sad sigh. If it were that simple, he wouldn't resort to an invasion. No, he wants Konoha to burn. And he wants me there, broken, and dying to watch it happen. Man, the more I hear about this guy, the crazier he gets. Naruto noted with a blink, before frowning slightly. We're not gonna let him do that though, right, old man? There was a flicker across the man's eyes, a quiet kind of melancholy, as he smiled sadly back at Naruto. Indeed now, Naruto, why don't you step outside for a minute? I need to talk to your Kin-chan alone for a bit. But Naruto immediately protested, before Kin put her arm on his shoulder. I'll be fine, Naruto-sama. You just have to wait outside the office until Hokage-sama is finished talking to me. She smiled slightly at him through the mask. Besides, don't you trust him? Fine. The blonde boy huffed slightly before smiling back at the boy. I'll be right outside, old man. Sarutobi nodded, and smiled back at the boy watching him, as he walked back out the door, before when it clicked shut, an uneasy silence hung in the air, before Kin's voice pierced through. You don't think you can beat him? I don't think I can beat him, and live. The Hokage corrected carefully, as he lightly shook his head. And I need Jiraiya-kun to help deal with the invasion forces. All right. The girl nodded carefully, as she visibly swallowed. Let's have it then. Have it then? The man seemed bemused for a moment, as he smiled kindly at the girl. Whatever it is you're going to threaten me to not hurt Naruto-sama. Kin answered with a simple, quiet determination, as she met his eyes unflinchingly. Child, you misunderstand why you're here. Sarutobi chuckled softly for a moment, before shaking his head, as he lightly leaned back in his chair. You're not here to be threatened. You're here because I wanted to meet you, and there are some things we need to discuss about Naruto-kun's future. Why? Kin finally couldn't take it, as she lightly crossed her arms about her chest, fingers digging into her arms. I'm nothing special. Just another stray he found, and took in. What does it matter? You're special to one of the people who is most important to me. That's enough for me. The Hokage smiled gently to the girl, and quietly turned his head, staring at the picture of a blonde young man on the wall. So, I want to ask you, as the one who was entrusted with Naruto's future, to make sure that it's the best future you can help make it. A better future than I could offer him. Kin stood there, rooted in her spot, as the kind old man spoke to her, and explained some things he couldn't tell Naruto. Plans, facts, information, secrets, the full weight of which settled like a mountain on her shoulders. Secrets she was entrusted with by one of the legendary Hokages. Finally, when it was finished, Kin could only bow her head in complete awe, as he asked her, Can you do that for a foolish old man, Kin-chan? Yes, Hokage-sama. The girl agreed, tears quietly streaming down her cheeks, as she nodded her head just barely. I won't fail. Not in this. I know, child. I know. The old man smiled softly at her, as he walked around, gently placing his hand on her shoulder, before carefully wiping the tears on her cheeks with his robes. Let's go see Naruto then, shall we? I'm sure he's nervously waiting to make sure you're okay. Of course, Hokage-sama. Kin agreed, nodding her head robotically, as she walked with him, as he opened up the door, and beheld the nervously shifting Naruto. All done, Naruto-kun. Is everything okay, Kin-chan? The boy could see the distress on her face, his eyes worriedly locking onto hers, as she smiled wanly back at him through her mask. I will be Naruto-sama. She paused for a moment, before some of that weight seemed to slide off her, as she slowly let her smile brighten. For the first time in my life I think I will be good. The Hokage spoke up, before smiling down at Naruto. Naruto-kun, how about we get some ramen? My treat. Sure, that'd be great, old man. Naruto nodded his head quickly, still watching Kin closely before smiling up at the Hokage. Naruto turned so quickly he missed the flash of sadness flash across the old man's face, as he lightly patted Kin's shoulder once more, before he couldn't help but laugh softly at the eager exuberance Naruto put forth. Naruto took a slow, deep breath, as he pushed himself up and away from the warm comfort of his bed, and Kin, carefully stretching out, he glanced around the room before coming to a slow, sinking realization. Today was the day. He knew on some level this had been coming. It was after all everything he'd been training for the last month. Today, he had to face the Kazekage's daughter, and today sand and sound would invade. After today, nothing would be the same. MMPH, time to get up already? The girl whined just a bit, as she shifted about on the bed, still refusing to open her eyes. Damn, I was hoping to sleep a while longer. You can sleep after today's done with. Naruto groaned quietly before grinning just a bit, as he suddenly slapped her ass. Now get up. Eep. Kin's eyes flashed wide open, as she stared at him for a moment, slack-jawed in amazement. Did you just slap my ass, Naruto-sama? My hand must have slipped. Naruto answered with a blush, as he glanced away, and began to slip out of the bed. Slipped, right? Kin snorted softly, as she shifted around, and grinned triumphantly at the boy. You're starting to get it, Naruto-sama. I have no idea what you're talking about, Kin-chan. Naruto responded with a carefully blank face, before he made a group of clones, and nodded to them. You know what to do. As one, the group saluted Naruto, grinning the same devious grin that often caused Irika to groan audibly, and palm his face. Right away, boss. She won't know what hit her. As the clones filed out, and Naruto began to dress, Kin eyed the boy carefully before she pursed her lips. You sent them to do something to the bimbo. It wasn't a question, Naruto could tell that much, as he shrugged his shoulders, and looked at her with a carefully blank face. Now, Kin-chan, I'm sure I have no idea what you could be talking about. They're just going to take care of some errands for me, and if Ino just happens to show up at the exams, wearing orange, you had nothing to do with it? Kin shot back, smirking softly. Indeed. Naruto agreed with another nod of his head, as he fought to keep the smirk off his own face. It will be some amazing coincidence, just like how it was a complete coincidence that someone had stolen all my clothes, left a copy of Sasuke's outfit, and put hair dye in my shampoo. You wouldn't ever do something like that to me, would you, Naruto-sama? Kin asked, her eyes wide, as she blinked up at him. Do you have a problem with oranges? Naruto curled a brow, as he lightly crossed his arms about his chest. Kin paused for a moment, considering her words very carefully before she answered. Not really? Then if I wanted to get you, why would I make it anything you wouldn't mind, or see coming? Naruto paused a moment, before he reached up, and lightly patted the stunned-looking Kin atop her head. And if you make me upset enough to get you, I will get you. And you won't like it at all, Kin-chan. The girl immediately felt a chill go down her spine, before studying the boy carefully. You wouldn't hurt me, would you, Naruto-sama? No, but that leaves plenty of ways for me to utterly humiliate you, now doesn't it? The boy grinned back at her for a moment before lightly tapping his lower lip. I think I'd start out with pink. I'm your devoted pet, Naruto-sama. Kin spoke up quickly, as she used her wide, glistening eyes on him. You wouldn't do something that horrible to your devoted pet, would you, Naruto-sama? Oh, me personally? Naruto smiled placidly at Kin before shaking his head. Oh no. I'd just have Ino take you shopping for a new outfit. I'd just let her know exactly why I was asking her to do it. Evil. Kin stared in downright awe at the boy in front of her, even, as she couldn't help but shiver in no small amount of excitement. I'll be good. I promise. I'll hold you to that. Naruto nodded his head, before pausing for a moment. Now, would you please take your hands out of my boxers? Do I have to? Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.